Thank you for joining us. I'm Justin McNaughton, and I'm joined with my partner, Sharon Urias. And this is another episode of You, Me, and IP. Today, we're going to be talking about non-traditional trademarks. And I just realized that Sharon tricked me into doing the intro so that I would have to say the title, which is Selling to the Subtle Perceptions of Sophisticates.
That was really good, Justin. Good job.
All right. So today we're going to be talking about some of our favorite trademarks, and these are different. These are not non-traditional, sometimes called sensory trademarks. Again, I'm Justin, and I file trademark applications, file patent applications, copyright applications, that sort of thing. And Sharon is a litigator, meaning she fights over all these sorts of things. So we've had a lot of fun doing these. So Sharon, you want to kind of set the stage, give us a little bit of an overview about what sensory marks are?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So sensory marks are non-traditional trademarks. And what that means is we're not just talking about words or a logo. We're talking about things that appeal to somebody's senses, that enables them to immediately identify that sound or that scent with a particular product or service. So as I said, we're talking about sounds, scents, colors, even shapes. These trademarks, even though they're non-traditional, they do function as, sort of normal trademarks, as indicators of the source and the quality of the goods or the services. And the consumer identifies the product or the service by seeing, hearing, or smelling the particular mark that we're talking about. You can even have taste function as a trademark, although Justin and I have talked about it, and it's really hard to come up with a taste that would be non-functional, which is really what you need in order to qualify as a trademark. So for example, if the function of the mark is synonymous with the good, it's not going to qualify as a trademark. An example would be a mint flavored breath mint. There's no way that any particular company could claim exclusive right to have a mint flavored breath mint and to indicate them as the source of the goods. So, the question is, why would you use a sensory mark? And there are things that consumers come to recognize as a symbol or a signature for a particular brand that need to be protected, that is more than just a word or a logo. And sometimes it's not even practical or practicable to put a word mark onto a product. So tying the sensory mark to the particular brand can increase the customer's association with that company. So Justin, let's start out talking about one of your favorites, something that's near and dear to your heart, and that's sound marks.
Yeah, for sure. I do. I really enjoy sound marks. And actually, I just realized I forgot to say, if at the end, we're going to do some Q&A. So if you think of questions along the way, feel free to put them into the Q&A as opposed to the chat. So put them into the Q&A and then we'll come back and get those, but at the end. But sound marks. So sound marks are terrific. And what's really interesting about sound marks is that there are, and we've got two examples here that we're going to play. But these marks are typically go along with a medium where people wouldn't expect just to see something written, or for some reason it makes it a stronger trademark to tie it in with a sound and the playing of their marks. So we're going to do this first one here, which is 20th Century Fox, which everyone I'm sure has heard.
Justin, it makes you immediately feel like you're in a movie theater to hear that, doesn't it?
It does. And I think that's the idea. And so if you look at this, when they play it, what's clever about it is you've got a couple of things. You've got one, you have the actual 20th Century Fox mark. So, and what I mean by mark is this kind of stylized spotlight thing, but then you also have it's animated. So the fact that it's moving in a certain way and doing a certain thing, that is also a kind of a non-traditional mark. And then of course you have this fanfare audio, this sort of band playing. And the idea is that if you walk in or you're in the other room and you hear that, oh, it's a movie, A, and B, that it's produced by Fox. And so that's the point of it. And then of course it also, one would hope that after a long period of time of having some pretty good movies, that people would anticipate the movie, right? Because it's brought by Fox. So then we'll go over to Warner Brothers. This is Merry Melodies for Looney Tunes, and it's a very different feel. And I know you all wanted to dance for that, so I'm the only one who actually did. But
well, you want to go and put on the cartoon channel and immediately watch money.
And that's the whole point, is that you've heard that, and so whenever you hear that, it's Looney Tunes. And well, at least old people like us know it's Looney Tunes. I don't know about younger folks, but and that's the idea. So you have, it's Warner Brothers. You may not necessarily know what Warner Brothers is, but you understand and hear that jingle and know it's associated with this cartoon. So what's kind of cool about sound marks, or what's difficult about them, is that, and this is true of all these non-traditional marks, is that you have to sort of earn these trademarks. These are not ones that the trademark office just give you, or that automatically becomes a trademark. You have to build that audience following so that the audience knows that it's a trademark. The trademark office will not just give you these. And most people, if you just play a random, like if we were just to play a random sound at the beginning of our presentations, like nobody would know that that's a trademark until, we got approval to spend way more money than we're going to get approval for on these podcasts. So,
and Justin, also, you can't get a sound mark for a functional sound either. So a telephone ringing for a telephone, you wouldn't be able to do that, but maybe you could in a completely different, unrelated, arbitrary context.
And one of the more famous cases was actually that Harley Davidson tried to get a trademark for that like, I don't even know, that rumbling, sound that a Harley Davidson makes. And the reason for that was that they have a particular, they've designed those engine, or those, I think it's the exhaust system, so that it has a part in it that makes that sound. Now, I personally think that the Harley Davidson case probably came out wrong, because I think that just because you put a part in to make a fantastic sound doesn't mean that sound is functional, because they could have designed it like everybody else and not had that noise. But that gives you an idea of how difficult some of these marks are. So then we move down to our next slide. We have, this is one that I've really enjoyed working on. And this is the artist Pitbull. And what he has done that's different than a lot of artists is that he has this grito that he uses, this yell, whenever he is performing or on his albums or his songs, so that that it's Pitbull is on that sound recording. And this works for him because he's very often working with another artist, and that Pitbull is actually on the recording, even if somebody else's artist, because you hear this sound. Let's go ahead and play that. And I was fortunate enough to be able to work on getting this regardation, but it's really fun to see.
More than that, you actually got the registration. So let's not be modest here.
Well, either way, it was a lot of fun. And the thing that was kind of cool about it is that one of the registrations is actually a sound recording used in a sound recording to show the origin of the goods, which is a little bit meta. And but the trademark office let us have it. And so you can hear the sound, and people may not know that they may not necessarily know that it's Pitbull, but they know, wait, I know this artist because I've heard that before. And that's what makes sound marks different than other marks. So,
yeah,
but we've got other kinds of marks.
Really fun. Right. So we also have color marks. And let's go to the next slide. So this is and I'll go through these, but basically a color mark, and similar to what Justin was saying, that you have to earn the mark, it's similar. I mean, that's the way it is for sensory marks. It requires proof of secondary meaning. And that's because the color red, for instance, you see red, you're not necessarily, even red on a shoe would associate it with the source of the goods until that has been established in the marketplace. So let's look at the Christian Louboutin shoe. Immediately when someone who's familiar with luxury goods sees a shoe with a red sole, they know that that's a Christian Louboutin shoe. And I mean, so he's known worldwide for the, red lacquer sole on his shoes. And it's the signature of his shoe. It's unmistakable. And in fact, it has become even synonymous with luxury goods. It's not just any red that he uses. There's a specific Pantone color. It's actually called Pantone 181663 TP, whatever that means. I don't know, but it's a specific shade of red. And this is something that Christian Louboutin actually had to fight in the courts, and that's for another day. But the bottom line is he did end up winning, and he does have trademark protection for that. So what that means is that other shoe manufacturers are precluded from putting red soles on their shoes, otherwise risking the wrath of Christian Louboutin. There are some other examples of color marks. You can see the Wolf range, which is trademarked for the red knobs on cooking appliances. When you see that, if you are familiar with cooking appliances, then you'll know that that's a Wolf. The scissors, you can see it has the iconic orange handle. That is a registration owned by a company called Fiskars. And when you see those orange handles, I am assuming especially if you're an elementary school teacher, you know those are Fiskar scissors. Tiffany and Company, the iconic blue box, the iconic blue period. That again it's called Pantone Tiffany Blue 1837, which is the year that Tiffany was established. And what's interesting about this is if you look at the boxes, and this is the image, you can see the top of a box, it has sort of a double trademark. It's got the color and it also has the brand name. But if you just saw the box laying on its side or from a distance, you would immediately know that that originates from Tiffany and Company. So the other one that Justin and I were talking about earlier is the UPS Brown. I'm not sure why they chose Brown. I know that there was an interview with the owner or the founder of the company, and he talked about it. But the bottom line is when you see one of these trucks driving by, or you see a guy wearing a brown shirt carrying a parcel, you know that's not FedEx, you know that's not DHL, you know with no uncertain terms that it's UPS.
And that one is interesting to me because it seems like brown would be used in a lot of those places for a lot of those uniforms, but it really isn't. I mean, you don't ever see a brown truck unless it's UPS.
That's right.
So it's interesting that it's such a familiar color, but it actually functions as a trademark because you're only familiar with it because you see UPS trucks so often.
It's very interesting. And it doesn't mean that no one else is allowed to use the color brown. It just means that they can't use the color brown in a competing good or service as UPS. And they have many, by the way. So Cheerios is an interesting one. General Mills applied for trademark protection for the yellow color of its Cheerio boxes, which it's used since the 1940s. And it was denied registration for that. Justin, how do you feel about it? I mean, if I see the Cheerios box, I know immediately that it's Cheerios based on the color.
And I think this is one where Cheerios, I actually don't, I mean, I went and looked after we started talking about this, and I just don't think there are any other cereals that are using this yellow. I think that if General Mills really wanted to, they could find a way to do this. What I wonder is if they haven't used the color in enough places, and maybe that's why it is, because you think about UPS, they use brown everywhere, and Cheerios, it's just on that box. But I would bet you that if they wanted to get that color, I think it would be available to them.
It is an interesting one, and they do have many other Cheerio products that are in different color boxes. But this particular product has been around, as I said, since the 1940s. and they haven't changed it as far as I can tell. So anyway, maybe that's something to think about for General Mills if they haven't already. The next category of sensory marks that we're going to talk about are scent or fragrance marks, which is a really fun one. Here's a famous one.
So Play-Doh is probably the most famous, and Sharon and I have actually talked to the lady who did the registration for this, and it's a really the thing that's bizarre, I guess, about scent or fragrance marks is, again, you have this functional problem, right, where the scent can't be functional, and it also, you have to earn these trademarks. It's not presumed that just because your product smells, we'll say, funny, that people recognize as a trademark. People may just think it smells that way. And so Play-Doh, the fact that Play-Doh is probably the most famous, where it has that very distinctive smell that whenever you smell it, you know that it's Play-Doh, is intentional. That is something that they've added to it, because if it was the actual ordinary smell of this product, they would not be able to get a trademark for it. So it's the fact that they've added a smell that doesn't have anything to do with what their product is. And then over time, people, enjoy or know and associate that smell with that product.
So Justin, how do they describe the scent for the trademark office to get that registration?
So it's kind of funny. So one of the requirements is, just like any trademark, you have to describe it. So if you do a regular trademark, you have to describe what it looks like, or if it's standard characters. For these kind of marks, it's the same thing, and same with sounds. But for Play-Doh, they described it as a sweet, slightly musky vanilla fragrance with slight overtones of cherry combined with the smell of a salt wheat-based dough. So you clearly would know what it was from that description.
Clearly.
But it has become iconic. And, as they, and I don't know how old this one is, but it seems like this has been around for a long, long time.
So Justin, would you be able to get a registration, you think, for, let's say you walk into a store and it always has the same scent, and all the stores have that particular scent?
I think so. An example of this is when you walk into a hotel, like a Marriott, when you walk into some hotels, they always smell the same. And a lot of times it's not just the entire brand, it's a particular, how there are all sorts of Marriotts. It'll be a certain Marriott smell a different way. And I think absolutely that you can do that, because people don't necessarily walk in and they're like, oh, smells like a hotel. But they walk in and there is something where you're like, okay, this is all familiar to me. And that is the kind of quintessential trademark thing.
The secondary meaning.
The secondary meaning means that, oh, I know this and I'm comfortable with this.
So where does that cross the line to air freshener? And always using the same air freshener, which has a functional purpose that would not qualify as a trademark.
Yes. So if you walked into a hotel and the receptionist had smeared himself down with a pine fresh freshener, that probably is serving a different function. And they might want to look at personal hygiene there. But it's a great point, because if you are putting a smell in because you are hiding something, or if the purpose of the product is to hide the smell of your car, then that's functional, and it's not going to probably be protectable. But if you have, and one of the examples is that there's a company that got a trademark registration for this smell, and they put the smell into their yarn. And there's no reason to have the smell in the yarn other than they, wanted people to associate that with their brand. And that ended up being protectable, because there's no functional reason to have a smell in yarn. And so that's what you have to look at for these. So, but it is fun.
I would assume these are pretty hard to get because of the functional aspect associated, just like with taste as with scent. So like for a perfume, for instance, that has a functional purpose. So how could you really? Yeah,
and perfumes are difficult, and perfumes are a slightly different thing that maybe we can talk about another day. But yeah, these are products that are where the purpose is not like nobody buys Play-Doh because they're like, oh, I bet that smelled nice in the front room, right? Like you buy Play-Doh because your kids are going to play with it. It's just that you recognize it's Play-Doh from that smell. So it is difficult. And I think you can get a feel for how difficult it is by the products that we've talked about and the sort of stature of those products, right? Like everybody, I assume, recognizes these products that we've talked about today. And that's what makes them different. But it also shows you how difficult it is to obtain these. Like you have to have done enough marketing where your customer base really does recognize these things, because you have to submit evidence to the trademark office that it functions as a trademark. And
it would be an interesting lawsuit if somebody, say a candle company made candles with the scent of Play-Doh. I would assume that would infringe on this scent mark.
Yeah, I think they'd get sued. Yeah, I think there'd be no reason to do that. And I think that it would be an interesting lawsuit because it's not the same product, but I think it would be like a dilution claim, where you're impacting the value of the Play-Doh brand where it's being used elsewhere. But that gives you another concept of how these marks have become so famous that it's not going to be normal trademark infringement sometimes to resolve issues. It's going to be, somebody is taking your iconic brand and using it in a different way. So that it would take at least, the minimum would probably be 5 years. But a lot of these marks were used a lot longer than that before they were finally registered. But the trademark office does require evidence of the fame, it's not the fame, but they require evidence that your customers recognize this alternative mark as a trademark, that they associate it with your goods. And that can be difficult to show.
The acquired distinctiveness is what we're talking about again, or the secondary meaning.
Right. And it's easier in other marks to show that acquired distinctiveness than it is in these non-traditional marks. And I will say, the more unusual your sound, scent, or color, the easier it is to get that trademark protection right. So if you're using a color that is just different than colors people are used to, it's easier to get that trademark than if you just pick, primary red or primary blue. It becomes more difficult because that color is everywhere.
And I think it's probably the same with scent also. So Play-Doh inventing a scent versus using, I don't know, the smell of roses, for example, although that could equally obtain protection if you're using it, as you said, in combination with a product like putting it in, embedding it in the smell of yarn, or something along those lines.
Well, let's see, should we take some questions?
Yes.
Let's see here. The first question here, or I says, not a question per se, but observation. The University of Arkansas registered the sound mark for the ooey, the pig, and I'm not going to do that one. I didn't fall for it.
Can
I'm not going to try to do this sound.
I don't know what it sounds like.
No, but I think it's actually your turn, Sharon, to do one of these marks. But yes, this is an example. The University of Arkansas has a famous. It's essentially a pig call, a wild boar call, if you're going to make it sound cooler. And everyone in the stadium is expected to make the sound or be thrown out, is my understanding. And so, yeah, that is something where all of a sudden the university, because of the way that its fans use it, that sound is associated with football. With
and does it matter that the fans use it versus the university using it?
And I think that's an interesting question, right? Because in a way, it's not really the university using it, but they're encouraging it and coaching it and that kind of thing. And so after a certain time, it's not any particular fan, so it's probably them over anyone else, right? And I appreciate you bringing that one up, because it is, although some of these in context, you're trying to imagine Notre Dame all of a sudden having all of its fans do this this wild boar yell. So, but yeah, that's definitely a good example. Let's see if we have any other questions here. Well,
looks like this was pretty straightforward.
okay. Well, let's kind of just a couple quick things, and then if there are any other questions, then we'll just wrap up. I think we're almost at time anyway. So on these marks, the way that you set out is to get these is essentially these don't usually happen accidentally. These types of marks, somebody at Play-Doh was thinking about it when they put this smell into the Play-Doh. Somebody at Fox was thinking about this and actually recorded it. And it sounds like it, given the date, probably with a full band, recorded this sound and then used it very intentionally every time that they produce something. Pitbull, every time he begins rapping on a song, he uses that yell. So these are very intentional, but I think that they're not used as often as they could be. I think more companies could use these marks. And over time, what'll happen is if you use it intentionally, it's not like it could hurt you, right? But you go ahead and use this thing that you've come up with. And then 10 years later, you may realize like, oh, look at this. All of our customers now associate that sound, smell, whatever it is with our brand. And then that's at the point where you can register it, because then it's developed some notoriety and other competitors may
I agree
start
with that
to use
completely. I think that that's a really good piece of advice, because as part of your branding strategy, you want consumers to think of you when they see certain images, hear certain sounds. And particularly with sound marks, which, they're not as hard to obtain, I think, as some of the others. NBC's chimes, my understanding is that was the very first sound mark that was issued by the trademark office. People always think of the SVU bum, bum, bum sound. I can't do it, but the sound that I'm talking about. I don't know if they've applied to get that registered, but certainly that's another one that people associate.
I don't, but I would love to hear you sing it.
I'm sure you would.
Awesome. Well, anyway, thank you all for joining us. And we plan on doing another one of these soon. Appreciate Greenspoon Martyr for hosting us, helping us do this. So we'll talk to you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you.